So before I got diagnosed, I knew very, very little about HIV. I thought it was a death sentence. That's all I really knew. I thought, I'd die really quickly after getting diagnosed. I thought everyone did, and I didn't kind of realize that people could live a normal, healthy life with it. Um, my education in school was very, very limited about HIV in it, and I don't remember there being much said in school. I remember rumors in the playground, kids saying don't touch that person, they've got AIDS, or people just making these stupid comments and ridiculous rumors up. I remember seeing the Tombstone advert from the 80s. I remember seeing that a few times when I was growing up, and that was probably one of the things which kind of shaped my understanding, my miseducation, I suppose, at that time. It was just, I just thought it was this horrible thing that people would die from and get really sick. That's really kind of where I was. So I was diagnosed in November 2011, and weirdly, I remember it quite well. I think, and I think a lot of people I've spoken to, since kind of talking publicly about HIV, all say the same thing, that they remember like these weird details and these small details about, the diagnosis and where they were and kind of what happened. And I'm very much the same. So yeah, back in October 2011, I got sick. I thought I had the flu. It was a bad. It was a bad cold, maybe. Basically, I felt a bit nauseous. I had fever. I'd like night sweats, kind of general muscle aches and pains like you get with the flu, and just generally felt a bit rough and run down. But it wasn't until like the end of the week or so that I was ill for, I got this rash down my arm, and that's kind of when I started to think maybe this is something different, something not quite as 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 easy as a cold or the flu. My original reactions to it was, this is meningitis, because it looked like the meningitis rash. I remember seeing adverts about meningitis, and remembering what that looked like, and I did the whole glass test to see if the rash would disappear, and it didn't. So I was kind of, my head was like, that must be meningitis. So I went to the GP, and she kind of asked me about my symptoms, and had a look at the rash and things, and she thought the same thing, and she immediately rushed me off to A&E. And that's where I was in A&E for a few hours for the evening, when they ran all kinds of tests and things. And a week later, I was called to go back to the hospital to get my results. And I was called back into the infectious diseases clinic. Infectious diseases or tropical diseases, I can't remember which one exactly. And that kind of set some weird thoughts in my head, because I hadn't been out of the country or been anywhere tropical or anything like that. So I remember going into the hospital, and it was a very cold day. I felt kind of happy, kind of normal, because I was enjoying my life, and I just moved to Brighton recently, and I was enjoying my time there. And so I sat in the waiting room, they called me in, and this is where these little kind of memories and weird random things that I remember start coming into play, because I remember going into the room. It was quite small. There was like a frosted window on the sides, and there was a doctor and a student in there, like a student doctor. And I remember the doctor obviously gave asked for my consent for the student to be there, and absolutely fine. And then the doctor asked me this question, and he said to me, "Have you ever been tested for HIV before?" My response was no, because I'd never I'd never thought about being tested for HIV. It never crossed my mind, and it wasn't something I was worried about at the time. And he said, as part of the results or the tests, sorry, that they did when I was in hospital, HIV was one of them, and that result had come back positive. The feeling of hearing that news just crushed me. It broke me. I was very upset. I was very scared. My head was just going everywhere. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't listen to what the doctor was telling me. I couldn't listen to anything he was saying. There was just this image in my head of, you're gonna die, like this is the end of your life, and you need to start telling people that you're gonna die. I thought, yeah, I literally, it didn't matter what the doctor was saying. That was all I could think of. I thought, yeah, my life was over, and that'd be it. Yeah, and I was in quite a horrible place for a while after that. I remember most of the rest of the day I was crying. And for the weeks following it, I was just in a challenging and a horrible place, really. I think, as we know now, the fact I'm here 10 years later, just over 10 years now, we know that HIV isn't a death sentence, but it took a long time. It's one thing I'd say. It took a very long time. For me, I spent a lot of time, reading, reading articles online, reading, information that I got from the clinic. I had literally had this massive bag, which was just full of like leaflets and little like little like books that were produced by different charities and the NHS. I remember spending so much time reading through these. I would get my boyfriend at the time to read through them. I'd get my parents to read through them, my brother, everyone who would show an interest, I got them to read it as well. For them to really understand what it was, and of course for me to actually start to understand. It took me probably 6 to 8 months to kind of understand truly what it meant, in terms of the medical side of things, that I wouldn't die, that the meds would keep things going, and I'd have generally a fairly normal lifespan. I say normal, but normal comparable to people that live without HIV, a normal lifespan comparable to those people. But yeah, talking to my doctors, talking to my friends about it, and it's a very sort of small group of friends that I would talk to, because I was fairly closed about my status at that time. And there was also a friend of my ex-boyfriend who was the only person I knew living with HIV, so I spoke to him quite a lot. Probably cried on him a few times as well back in those days. But I really kind of just put myself in a situation where I was spending a lot of time and a lot of energy and effort reading about HIV and sort of trying to understand what it was. And I looked read a bit about the history and kind of where it started in terms of the AIDS crisis in the late 70s, early 80s, and that all really kind of started me to sort of understand that at least I wasn't going to die in a few weeks' time. That that really kind of started things moving for me. But in all honesty, I wasn't truly comfortable with my diagnosis until December last year, December 2020, and that was, I don't know what it was. I was going through a lot in my life, but that's when I really started to be fully comfortable with it and with myself. And that's when I started talking publicly about my status and about what being HIV positive means. So yeah, so it took a while. So yeah, so in December, 1st of December last year, I decided to record a video, which was sort of talking about my story, about being diagnosed and living with HIV for the past 10 years or 9 years back then, and I put it on YouTube, on Facebook, and something just really mad happened, and I got quite a lot of views within the first 24 hours, and it was just kind of going up and going up, and like all my friends were sharing it, and people were reaching out to me and talking to me, friends who I wouldn't have expected to accept me being someone living with HIV. They were just really interested and really welcoming of it, and uh, it's it just I remember I remember then I was getting quite upset, because of all these beautiful comments that people were leaving, and people reaching out to me and talking to me, and that was, yeah, that kind of really made me, I think, again, just that kind of another little bit of acceptance of myself, the fact that other people, random people, old friends from school, people who I just wouldn't expect to understand it or to really care, yeah, it just really helped me to kind of further accept myself and my status, of being someone that lives with HIV. And then a little while after that video, I decided to set up an Instagram page, and I've been using that since sort of mid-December last year, just to talk about HIV and to try and challenge some of the myths and the stigma surrounding it, and just to, hopefully for people to see that living with HIV isn't a massive thing anymore. Okay, I talk about it a lot, but I feel like we need to talk about it a lot for it to become normalized, and for us to challenge the stigma. I feel like that's probably one of the only ways that we can do it, is by having conversations and by showing people that you can have a great life, and you can live for a normal length of time. So that's really why I kind of, I do, talk online, and I do make videos. That's I think that's the main reason. I want people to see what it's like to know that they're not alone, in the diagnosis. There's so many people, since I've started talking publicly about it, there's so many people that have reached out to me from countries around the world. Some people have such a challenging time, even if they've been living with HIV for a long time. There's countries where being positive is legal, in terms of, if I was to go there, I could be deported from the country, and there's places where it's so stigmatized and still seen as a gay man's virus, that people can't talk about it, people can't be open about it, people have to take their medication in secret, they have to cover their heads when they go to the doctor, because they don't want anyone to see. And it's just, we can't live in a world like that. We can't let the world carry on stigmatizing us like it has been. We've all got to work together and educate each other and ourselves, about the reality of the situation. There's so much more work that we can do, and we can really sort of work to improve, how we're treated as people. Because really, we're no different to anyone else. We can't, once we start on meds and we become undetectable, we can't pass HIV on. The whole term U equals U, which is undetectable equals untransmittable, is that's the main thing. Once we're at an undetectable level, we can't pass HIV on. It doesn't really do any damage to our bodies. We're absolutely, fine. And yeah, so that's a few of the reasons why I do this and do talk publicly. I think it's really important. It's really important for me as well, in terms of accepting myself and being comfortable with living with HIV. It's been really important for me to do that for my own development, my own yeah. So when I was growing up, there wasn't much positive information around being HIV positive. It was all negative. It was the tombstone adverts of the 80s, and the stigmatization that people are really sick and that you can see these people and they're dying and not living well. So I just wish it was portrayed in a better light. I wish there was some practical information about living with HIV, and also more practical information about how it's transmitted, and how it's not transmitted, of course, because HIV isn't transmitted by touching someone or by kissing someone. And there was so many rumors like that in school growing up. I remember people like don't, if you touch that person you'd get AIDS. There was kids that were seen as being gay, whether they were or not is didn't matter, but people would be like, don't touch that person, they've got AIDS and you'll get AIDS from them if you touch them. And that stigma is because of how it was portrayed and how we saw it growing up, because I used to get involved in rumors like that, and because I thought that was real, I thought that was true, and that led to my self-stigma around HIV. So I just wish people knew that the medication was there and that it works, and that I wish there was information on the only ways that you could transmit HIV and get HIV, and the fact that you can live a very normal life, a very good life, I want to say. And also some of the kind of practical information about living with HIV, about staying healthy, eating well, exercise. I wish there was information like that. And yeah, I just wish there was something. When I was in school, education was very lacking. Sexual health education was very lacking, I should say. So I just wish there was something that wasn't just negative or wasn't just ignored as a subject, because I think it's so important to understand how not to get it, and how to also look after yourself in terms of testing and regularly testing yourself. I think there's a lot that we can do, and should do in schools, and for education for people, when they're going through different systems of education. I think there's a huge amount that we can and should be doing. HIV and sexual health shouldn't be a subject that people are so scared of talking about. People need to be empowered with education to know that they can talk about it, and that there's no harm in going for a test. There's no harm in looking after your sexual health, just like there's no harm in looking after your mental health, and there's no harm in looking after your physical health. Your sexual health is important as well, and that shouldn't be stigmatized. So I think there's a huge amount more work that needs to happen for us to get to a point, that the government has targets now where they want to stop any new HIV transmissions by the year 2030, and which is fantastic, and we can see numbers are going down, but what we need to do is alongside that is fight the stigma, and the only way that we can start that stigma reducing process is to educate and to talk about HIV, to talk about sexual health. That's the only way that we can do it.